Hey guys, Mr. B here, and in this video we're going to be going over chapter 1.1 on science skills. So this video is pretty much just going to be me going over the information. There are practice problems throughout the notes, but we are not going to be answering them in this video. There's a whole separate video of me going over the practice problems, so if you want to look at that one, if you need help on those, you can go watch that, but otherwise this is just mainly to help you learn the information better. So in this first section we're going to be learning about what is science? How does science work? What's its relationship between science and technology, as well as some of the different branches. So just kind of setting the basis for the chapter and just kind of get an idea of what science is. So let's talk about the process of science and kind of how it works, right? So when you hear the word science, there's a very broad range of stuff that science covers, and its definition can sometimes be a little bit challenging. If someone were to ask you, define what science is, you might say, people with lab coats and really smart guys with glasses, or, explosions and chemicals. And you might say all these topics, but you're not really defining what science is. Science can be defined in kind of two ways, okay? One, it's a system of knowledge. So there are certainly topics that we cover that you would consider science topics, right? Like chemistry and physics and biology and all this other stuff. And on the other hand, not only is it a system of knowledge, but it's also a method that you use to find knowledge, or a process that you use to find knowledge. So there are things or topics that we study that we consider science or scientific, and there are ways that we go about learning or studying things that is scientific, right? So you can take something that is maybe not considered a topic of science per se, but you can go about it in a scientific way of thinking, or vice versa. You can take something that is scientific and go about it in a way that's not a scientific way to think about it. Okay, so part of the excitement of science is that you don't really know what you're going to find, but a lot of times it kind of begins with a question or maybe being curious about something, and it's usually going to end with you learning information, okay? The main goal of science is you're always trying to learn something, okay? You're always trying to learn about a problem that maybe you didn't know beforehand. That's always the goal of science. So a lot of times, of course, in science you do experiments. Sometimes these experiments require observations. Now, when we say the word observation, maybe you think of seeing something with your eyes, like I'm observing it, right? But there's lots of different ways that you can observe something. There are qualitative observations or descriptive observations, where you're describing something or you're looking at the quality of it. So a lot of these kinds of observations require our senses: sight, touch, smell, taste, hearing, right? Which on an everyday basis is very common. But in science, a lot of times we deal with measurements. And so those kinds of observations, we call those quantitative or numerical observations. And that's where maybe you're taking the mass of something. You're measuring how long it is. You're timing it to see how long it takes for something to happen. You're finding its volume, something along those lines, right? And it's the combination of both of these together that then gives us a lot of information about that object or phenomenon, and then we can describe it in much better detail. So, okay, like I said, there are some practice problems here, but we are not going to be answering these. There's a video of me going over those separately, so if you want to watch that one, go watch that later, but we're just going to keep on moving, talk about information here. All right, so when it comes to science and technology, right? Science and technology are two things that are very closely related. And in fact, if you think of the word technology, something that maybe comes to mind right off the top of your head is some kind of gadget, right? Something that is electronic, maybe even your cell phone, or some really cool gadget you've seen before. And, that's what you think of technology. Now, certainly technology can be complicated, and it can use electricity and, be all fancy. But to be honest, just if we were to define the word technology, it's a very basic definition. Technology is the use of knowledge to solve practical problems. So a lot of times the goal of science is to expand our knowledge, and the goal of technology is to take that knowledge that we've just learned and apply it to then solve a problem that we couldn't solve beforehand. So I'm going to give you an example of a piece of technology that you maybe never even realized was technology. Okay, hand sanitizer. So, of course, a long time ago, scientists didn't know that there were germs or why people got sick. To be honest, long time back in the day, they used to think that people got sick because they were possessed by demons or it was the work of the devil. And it took quite a long time for them to realize that there are things that get in the body that make you sick, that are really small, or at least can't be seen with the naked eye. And so when that knowledge was finally discovered, and it took a very long time for that knowledge to become discovered and also for people to accept it, they then had to come up with some kind of way to make sure that those things either don't make you sick, right? So that we kill them, or once they do get in the body, we have some way to battle it. And so we had to create some kind of, thing that could solve the problem of how do we protect ourselves from these things that get in our body, or kill them before they get in our body or once they're in our body. And so there's basically, all medications, all medicine in general, or hand sanitizer, soap, is all just technology. We used our knowledge of what are these things that get in our body and how are they battled, how can they be killed or destroyed, and we'll create something then that can do that. Okay? So not all technology has to be really complicated. Pretty much any knowledge that you know of or that you use to then create something that can help you is a piece of technology. Okay? Even a pen, for example, is a piece of technology, which is how can we essentially write information down without having to carry like a bottle of ink with us all the time. Oh, I know. Let's take the ink and put it inside of some kind of container, and then the ink will only come out too when this thing on the end gets touched down onto something, and then the ink can come out there so it doesn't even drip out all the time. That was a piece of technology. So anyway, so science and technology are interdependent, and that basically means is that they are reliant on each other. Usually, as science gets better, technology gets better, right? As we learn more and more about things around us and how things work, we can then create more and more things that do cooler stuff that can solve more problems, right? So they go hand in hand. As one goes up, the other goes up. And it's not always in the same order either. So it's not like we always learn more information about science and therefore then we make cooler technology. Sometimes it's we make a piece of technology that then allows us to gain more knowledge in science. So they're always helping each other out, but as to what the order is, whether does science get better first or technology get better first, it can go either way. It can go both directions. So, okay. So we'll talk about here the branches of science next. So when it comes to science, of course, there are branches or different categories or topics, okay, that things fall into. So we're going to be talking about natural science. Natural science is the science of the natural world. And as to what the heck does that mean? There's the natural world and there's the supernatural, right? So the natural world is basically anything that you can observe, either using your senses or using some type of machine that can enhance your senses. The supernatural, so things that are not part of the natural world, we consider supernatural, right? So for example, Bigfoot, angels, ghosts, whatever, aliens. All of those things are things that we cannot observe, or at least have not been able to observe, either with our senses or with any kind of machine or technology that enhances our senses. So, we have yet to see real ghosts or actually measure them or observe them in any way, shape, or form, or Bigfoot, or angels, or aliens. So we consider them to be part of the supernatural, not the natural world. If it's part of the natural world, we can observe it in some way, shape, or form. So the natural sciences are typically broken up into three branches. Okay, we have physical science, earth and space, which sounds like two, but it's really just one. Okay, earth and space, and then life science. And of those branches, there are fields that fall under each one. So typically under the physical sciences, we have physics and chemistry. Physics is the study of matter and energy and how things move around and interact with each other through forces and motion. This is most of the first half of this class. We'll be basically dealing with physics concepts. Chemistry is the study of the composition of matter, its structure, its properties, and reactions, and how matter interacts with each other, chemically speaking. We won't really be doing any chemistry in this class, but you guys will be taking chemistry as 10th graders, and you'll learn all about chemistry, which is my favorite subject. And I teach that one too, which you may have me or you may have Mr. Hoffman. But anyway, or I guess if Mr. Hoffman's still teaching at this time, because who knows how old this video is, but currently he is still teaching. It is 2020. So, as for Earth and space science, the main field for Earth science is geology, which is the study of the origin of the Earth, its history, and its structure. A lot of times when you think of geology, you might think of people who study rocks and minerals. But modern day Earth science also involves the study of living organisms and the different ecosystems that they live in and their habitats and stuff. So it's not just looking at rocks really anymore. It's much more encompassing. But as for space science, the main field of that one is astronomy. Don't confuse astronomy for astrology. Okay, astronomy is the study of stars and the universe and the sun and moon and planets. And astrology is the study of like stars and how they line up or make certain things in the sky that can predict your future, right? Make your horoscope, which is not a scientific field. So, and then as for life science, the main field for that is biology, which is the only life science primarily, but there's different versions of it. So, biology, though, however, again, studies living things, but it also studies the origin of those living things and the behavior of those living things. So it's not just looking at living things and their structure and cells, but it's more than that, right? It can be more encompassing. So, try not to narrow all these things down just to little things because you're so used to thinking it was that. They are very broad. So, okay. As for the last part of this section, we're just going to look at, the big ideas of physical science and the main reasons and nature of science itself. So, what are the basic rules of nature? Basically, what they're saying is that there are a lot of things, of course, about the world that we don't know. There's a lot of things about the universe that we don't know. There's a lot of things just in general that we just don't know about, right? We don't know how the universe began. We don't know how life started on planet Earth. We don't even know, to be honest, how life begins in the human body, right? And I don't mean by that like we don't have any knowledge whatsoever of, how a baby is made. I mean, we don't know what that spark is that makes something a bunch of chemicals and all of a sudden now it's a living organism that, can replicate its cells and do its own thing. Like we don't know how to create life in a laboratory yet. We know how to clone things. We know all kinds of stuff, but there's still a lot of things that we don't know in this world. So the main thing we need to understand is that even though we certainly know a lot about how the world works and a lot about the world around us, we're constantly trying to learn new things every single day because there's still a lot of stuff that we just don't know the answers to. And that's primarily the goal of science, is trying to discover those things. Okay? So remember that science is a process of how you go about learning information, and it's also a body of knowledge. So it's not only a process, but it's also a lot of information, of course, that we know about the world. Okay? Now, be aware that science is constantly changing. So things that we know of today that we might think are true or that we think we know everything about them could change tomorrow. Things in science are constantly being updated and constantly changing. So we need to be careful that we don't fall prey to thinking that we just know everything and there's nothing else to learn, even about topics that we already think we know everything about, like gravity, which is a concept that we've known about for a very long time. And we're still learning more about because we just discovered gravitational waves in the last 1 or 2 years. So you have to be careful that even in science, when you say oh yeah, it's a scientific fact that this or whatever, those facts may not hold up forever. Okay, it could be in 10, 20, 30 years, we learn something new, and all of a sudden, all of this stuff that we used to know just comes crumbling down on us because we were so set in our ways, we didn't even realize that we didn't know everything yet. So, science is always changing. You got to be able to change with it. Okay. Even sometimes when people think that it doesn't ever change and that we know it all, we don't. So, all right. Anyway, that is it for this first section. Hope that gives you a little bit of an idea of just what science is and how it works, as well as some of the different subjects in science. If you need some help on the practice problems, I have a video of me going over that, so you can go watch that one. Or if you want, you can always reach out to me by email, talk to me in class, or we could always sit down and do a Google Meet or something face-to-face if that works better. So anyway, I'm Mr. Bosquez. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.